I make one dough. I used to make all these different types of dough because when I worked in industrial systems, that's what you did. And you'd make like all these different types of dough that came from all these different cultures, which was beautiful. Like you make a baguette dough and you make a ciabatta dough and you'd make a brioche dough, and like they're all different doughs. And that was great. But like, I just wanted to make dough with like what's here, but also what's gonna be good to grow here, right? So multi-grains, because we should be planting multiple grains, not monocropping just one variety. So I have a mixture of like Quebec and Vermont grown flours. I'm using good water. I'm putting like the culture into it. I'm adding it like, okay, people have a hard time with sourdough, so we gotta make it a little sweet. So at first I was pulling in cane sugar, and then I was like, wait a minute, we're in Vermont, maple syrup, everything. But as a baker with the skill set that I had working in industrialized food, it took me about 1.5 years to learn how to wean off of cane sugar onto a syrup, which just doesn't work with all the techniques and the baking skills that I had. The dough that I make pertains to the restrictions and access that I have in this place. And this one dough can be used for donuts. It can be used for buns, it can be used for loaf bread, it can be used for babka. I can take a whole bunch of vegetables or meat and cheese and I can shove it inside the dough and bake that. That's a knish, right? Or a dumpling. I can bake it into a loaf bread and it's soft, just like Wonder Bread was soft. There's a huge culture of like, we have an emotional attachment to this food, and I'm trying to use the right things to meet people where they're at, to create food that works for them with what is coming out of the ground here that's good for the environment.
Do you think you would get any criticism in the culinary world?
Oh, absolutely. Probably. I don't know. I don't really care. I think Anthony Bourdain would like my dough though. I think it's beautiful to hold on to traditions. But how do I make a dough that like is gonna work for everybody? How do I make a dough that's like working within my community? The dough itself. So it takes me like 48 hours to make it. I mean, really, it takes generations. But once we get to that point, then it takes me 48 hours. So I'd start with like feeding the starter. And then I do a pre-ferment where it's just the flour and the water. And then I add the starter and a lot of the sugars, and I knead that together. And then I add the water, and then I let that like ferment. Then I add the salt at the very end. Not the very end, that's the halfway mark. About 24 hours out at that point. I knead that in, and then I shape them, and then I put them in the cool room. Wednesday's dough was about 6 hours of bulk fermentation. So that's February. That's pretty fair. Winter's all about time. It's a more popular understanding that we are making a massive impact on the environment. I don't think that that's anything we ever didn't know. So how can I continue to survive knowing what I know and being accountable for that? I do not want to, do not feel safe to, and do not feel that it is ethical and moral to rely on the industrial food system. It's how do I do that and like still pay my bills? Like my job is cooking, so how do I keep cooking? Well, like the scale has to change first and foremost, because if we're growing food in small sustainable agricultural stuffs, then it has to be rotational. We're not talking about big yields of one thing where we can use specialized machines. It's really about getting hands-on again and being able to like serve a diversity of food throughout the seasons, to be able to preserve food, to use it, but to still serve people like live, like food that has nourishment. We can, and like so much of that is the mindset. I don't think that eating more kale is going to get us there. I think it's a great idea and we need to eat more kale. But it's not that there's not a period to that. I don't have to educate my customer base on what a donut is. It is something that it doesn't matter where in the world you come from, it is culturally recognizable and understood to be delicious. I want to make food that you can get at a convenience store, because if it's not convenient, we're not going to have access to it, because the thing that like people have less than money is time. So there that curve of like trying to be like, hey, look, I made this thing that I grew myself. Like, it's a donut. I made you a donut. You want a donut? Like, you don't have to, they sell themselves. And so instead of having to go out into the world within the capital realm and the markets and say, well, this is why my donut's great. Instead of saying, hey, we all need to eat sourdough, we need to eat organic, and we need to eat these things because we're gonna feel better, the ecosystem's gonna be better, our local communities will be stronger, we'll actually make more jobs. I just make a donut, people buy the donut, and then they go, whoa, this donut's great. And then they go, wait, this is different, I don't feel like shit. That's the best part, is people eat something that they're expecting is gonna make them feel really bad. And then they don't feel bad. So they're like, what's up with this? And I'm like, oh, you remember all that stuff in that documentary and that you're like, or all that stuff your grandma told you about like eating well, and like, it's an actual example that people can, because they've now had that experience, can understand on a level of knowledge that, wait, this really does make a difference. I look at things that are good for our ecology, not necessarily based off of our economy. So just because it grows here doesn't mean it's something I should use. On that too, there's other stuff that like doesn't physically grow here, but is completely tied into our ecology, like the chocolate I use, that is grown in the Dominican Republic, where the land that it's being grown on is part of a bird sanctuary and like regrowth, reforest project, is actually for migratory birds, one of which being the hermit thrush, which is the Vermont state bird, which is 100% within our ecosystem. And so like the chocolate that I'm using, if we want to keep offering like a good habitat and like ecosystem in the world for the hermit thrush, then like buying this chocolate's part of the process. And that's amazing, because as so much as we focus on local, we don't look at like what the process of it is, because like borders are just imaginary lines. I think we'd be much better off if we thought about migration and watershed than if we thought about like imaginary lines. The expectation that we're all going to be angels right off the bat, that we can somehow, like, just by knowing do better, is an absurd abstraction to me, because, like, everything, including habits, are there because, like, we practice it. It's not about, like, I live like this is my label. It's I'm constantly evaluating my process. I might get like pulled back and like learn that something that I was doing was just like so wrong and so off base. And I can adjust. I'm not gonna like wallow in that. I'm gonna say, okay, I learned, I've made that mistake. How do I not make that mistake again? How do I do this? And in turn, getting a little bit better every day. I wanna have and hold as much accountability for my life as I possibly can, while also giving back to a community and working in harmony with like the ecosystem. You can't go live in your little biodome bubble like alone. It doesn't work. Like ecosystems are about communicative, community-based cooperation. There's like the element of just be nice to people. Just be nice. Just don't be a douche. And then there's a matter of like, I want to like create value, but I don't think that value is necessarily capital. I think that value has to do with like me valuing myself, which means like making sure that I'm like healthy, which thusly makes me more sustainable, because if I'm like healthy and in a good place, then I can do more for like myself, which in turn allows me to turn around and share the excess of that. This seriously started as a way for me to figure out like what my depression was and like why I was so sad and angry all the time. And like the more that I'm like working directly with like plants and soil, the closer I am to the things I like need for life on a very basic level, the happier I am.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Orsano, and I made the thing that you just watched. Sarah Cannon wrote the opening music and recorded it short notice again. Thank you so much, Sarah. I'll be hanging out with Miss Weinerz again soon, so follow and subscribe so that you'll be sure to be notified when that comes out. If you like this, you can help me make more by supporting me on Patreon. Thank you so much to everybody who helped this month. But a special shout out to those of you who joined the fan club tier this month. Nomi Rand-Schleifer, Sharon Peck, Sasha Rossbecker, Emily Anderson, Ruth Galliard, Pat Rivers, and a big thank you to some big support by Greg and Sherry Lucier, Carol Ray, and Carol McIntyre. Thank you so much for watching.